Hello, it's Clark here. Hey, this is the first video I'm releasing in the ToC Down-Under 2021 Summit. It was live a couple of weeks ago, and since it was about turning ToC upside down, I decided to release the videos backwards. So in this one, you are going to have a really fun listen to one of Australasia's sort of ToC heroes. A lovely chap by the name of James Powell, who's been doing ToC since the old days, and has he's been a big influence in this part of the world. You'll find that there are two beautiful hosts in this session. The first is Graham Scott, and the second is Carl Perry. Both friends of mine, and they helped me put together the conference. I'm just going to hand you over to them. Sit back and just enjoy some interesting thoughts and opinions and stories about ToC, and also if you're interested in buffers, you'll hear a very interesting story about a biological buffer coming up. Trust me, it's really worth having a good listen to this. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Rather than spend a whole lot of time introducing you, James, you were one of the first, if not the first person to bring ToC into this part of the world. Why don't you tell us your story for a while? How did you get involved with ToC?
Yep. Well, I'll give you the short summary and then I'll go through in a bit more detail. Our initial foray into ToC was from reading The Goal, like so many people. And so we read the book, we implemented the concepts in the book, we got some results from that. And then we formed an alliance with Ali Goldratt and his UK office and D. Jacob, who was one of the partners at the time. And we did a whole bunch of projects, and then I retired 2006, and then I unretired about 6 years later and joined WiseTech to participate in the IPO there. So that's the condensed book version in 30 seconds. To go through that in a little bit more detail, I'd moved from the dairy industry computer team for what is now Fonterra with the New Zealand Cooperative Dairy Company into a consulting business in Auckland that works in the IT sector, building software and services and project related work. And as part of that exercise, the owners, one of the owners had read The Goal and had pointed out that The Goal seemed to have parallels in terms of it being a story about manufacturing, and said, well, we just manufacture software, don't we? So isn't it the same? We should do what's in the book. And I read the book and thought, bottlenecks, yeah, sort of understand all that, and put it away. And then when Dirk Vandetory and I were tasked with running the business and increasing performance, I felt a lot like the character in The Goal, like Alex Rogo given an impossible mission. So if you ever want to get shares in this business, you need to improve the performance. So I got the book out again and wrote a summary of it, which I actually found after my last house move. It was like 40 pages of handwritten notes of the book. And then tried to reverse engineer why it worked, and then re-engineered it for a software services business and rewrote the story, and then set about implementing that story, which took us about 3 months, at the end of which annual increase in sales became our monthly increase in sales, and performance went up, and quality went up, and profit went up, and cash went up, and everything went in the right direction. It was so fast, it was crazy. So we told Goldratt's team about that, and they explained, oh, well, actually, Ali's working on the thing called critical chain, which is basically doing what you've just already done. In re-implementing the ideas in software. We should compare notes. So D. Jacob came to New Zealand and ran 6 weeks of, or she ran 4 weeks of it, and another person ran the other 2, Kathy. And so we did all the training for the Jonah program and the production application workshop and the management skills workshop. And then later we did distribution and project management as well. So it's another 4 weeks training, and became the Abram Y. Goldratt Institute Australasia for 3 years. and sold the goal. And then it's not lucky and critical chain and necessary but not sufficient, like crazy, about 100 copies a month, and poured those out into the market and ran training courses for 3 years. At the end of that, we rebranded back to the new company we'd set up, the Argo Limited. And when I spoke with Dee about what we'd been doing, she said, "Oh, how many implementation projects have you done?" And we went, "Sorry, what? Implementation projects? I thought we were just doing training." And she said, "No, you idiot. The training courses are just a teaser for projects, man." And we must have missed that bit in the instructions, because we thought you train them and then they do it, right? And of course, that wasn't quite accurate. Only a percentage of companies were implementing off of either the book or off the training. So we started running projects, and there was a happy accident in there in which Dee, who trained us, explained how she'd done 60 implementations in 60 months for Procter & Gamble before she joined Elliott Goldblatt. So she was in on the first of the month, out on the last of the month, done. So we thought, okay, well, that's how you do ToC then. So that's normal, is it? And we set about to do exactly that, to develop a 20-day implementation schedule to implement that quickly with clients. It was only 18 months or so later, when I was in the States at an upgrade workshop, that I was at lunch with some people and they were talking about problems they were having on their projects. And I listened for a wee bit, and I said, "Oh, I'm a bit confused. How does any of that happen? I mean, they've only got 20 days. And they all sort of looked at me like I'd got a second head and said, "What do you mean 20 days? I said, "Well, it's all over in 4 weeks, right?" And they said, "Oh no, these projects take months." So I went, oh, okay, mine don't. But anyway, I went very quiet. I went and found some other people and said, "Dee Jacob did 60 in 60 months. Is that not normal?" And they said, "Oh no, she's exceptional. She's like off the curve, And I thought, right, we just thought that was the standard. So when we realized that we were fast, really fast, I thought, well, maybe we should be even faster, just to stand out. And in collaboration with some discussions with some clients, we figured out a way to implement the Drumbar for Rope project in only 5 days. So we'd have 2 preparation days about 2 weeks apart. So you're going for 1 day, disappear for 2 weeks, going for a day, disappear for 2 weeks, 5 days, bang, done. And then follow up maybe 5 or 6 one-day visits over the following 3 months. So that became our thing, rapid implementation methodology. And we did that.
What are the advantages of that, James, compared with the people you'd been talking to at the conference?
One of my sayings that came out of that was, by the time people figure out what they don't like about the solution, too late, it's already working. Okay. And there's nothing like the threat of reversal of fortune to sharpen everyone's attention. If you've got a graph of your daily GP and it goes bang, 30%, right? Like literally like that. And then they want to argue about it. You go, well, we could change it back, but then the GP will go back down. And the area under the curve is, whatever it is, might be $20,000 a day. It might be $100,000 a day, depending on the size of the site. Are you really sure you want to risk it? So, you can win almost any argument about negative side effects if it's already working. And the longer it takes to get it working, the more strength you have in defending the solution. Also, it's very easy when you switch it on and off like a light switch to point out that the injections that you are implementing are the difference. We had one of our customers, in fact, Carl, you know this guy because you used to work for him, did the trick of actually turning off the Drumbar for Rope injections for a week and then turning it on again and showing everybody the graph go bang, bang, like that. Right. So there's no doubt in anybody's mind, right? You remember this, Carl, I guess.
Yeah, and I was just thinking of another example when the same company went to purchase another company, and
that's
literally,
right.
So before the sale and purchase actually happened, we'd done all the pre-work. We took over on the day, and within 5 days, they ran out of sales.
Yeah, they tripped it out, didn't they?
There was no work to put through. But I wanted to pick up on something because we've had this through the conference already, and of course it came out of Ian's conversation. Mariama, I think perhaps. It's got built-in change management, so there's no need to do change management. So actually, you get the results. It's already changed. And it's happening, so there's no change management. It's like, so I just really like the way you're thinking about that.
It's another phrase that I started to build up during projects was by sort of Wednesday or Thursday of the project, if we would pick a measure and call it the wow measure. So I would ask the client the week before we started, what number, if it moved a lot, would cause you to say wow? And then all arguments are over, and it could be anything. You'd be surprised, you would think everybody would choose profit, but people realize it's going to take time because profit's calculated in arrears. It's very difficult to so, but they might say, well, the operating expense is relatively stable. So if GP per day went up by 30%, I'd say, wow, or if late orders halved and halved again, I'd say, wow, whatever their wow measure is. When you implement a constraint-based solution, and this is really the whole power of this thing in my head, is when you implement a constraint-based solution, if you act on the constraint, the effect on the wow measure is immediate. Like, it doesn't take time. It's like flipping a light switch. That wow measure will move straight away. So of course, you must pick wow measures that don't have lag in them. And if the client wants to choose a wow measure with lag, you have to say, that's nice, but that's a wow measure for these, that's a lag measure for these reasons. What would be a lead measure of that lag? Let's see if the lead measure moves within 48 hours. It should be almost instantaneous. That's the nature of constraint thinking. That's one of the reasons I like it so much. And if my team was implementing remotely, and they're phoning me in and saying, oh, this one, I think we've got it sorted. I'd always go, if you only think you've got it sorted, you missed something. Right, because if a wow measure hasn't gone bang by now, you missed it. You missed the constraint. Like, if you hit the constraint, performance moves immediately, and there won't be any question. There won't be any doubt in anybody's mind that you got it. That's one of the things that I so much love about this technology. This is in operations, of course. The thinking processes are differently measured in my mind, but certainly in operations, if you hit the constraint, performance should change instantly. So we did about 100 projects to complete the short story long. About 100, and then I retired. And then one of the clients that attended the course around the same time as you, Carl, was Richard White from WiseTech Global, and you've heard from Ian and you've heard from Mariana about things going on at WiseTech. And he'd been to the Hillside Resort, same as you, Carl, up on the mountain there, and had done the same course and engineered some of the systemic changes in his business in 2005-6 that resulted in the exponential growth that hasn't stopped yet. I've been going ever since. Well, he called me in about 2012 and said, are you busy? Now, I'd been traveling around the world and going to Disneyland and playing computer games and designing new products. So busy was relative. I said, a bit, working in the community, that sort of thing. And, would you like, we're about to potentially go IPO this company. Do you want to get in on that? And I thought, yes, I probably did. So over about a year, he talked me out of retirement and into a few days a month at WiseTech, which turned into 2 days a week, which turned into 3 days a week, and you've met, I think Peter Cronin's been one of the speakers in the last couple of days, was involved in that with me. And eventually he got me with a most excellent question, which as a focusing questions was brilliant. And I knew he had me the minute he said that. He said, is there anything in life you regret not doing? And I said, damn it.
Yeah, who taught him ToC? Who taught him ToC?
Who told him about focusing statements and critical questions? I said, I regret that we never turned it into software. He said, well, that's convenient. I've got 100 software developers here. Would you like 4 of them? I said, I knew you were going to say that. So that was what got me into WiseTech. Really, was the offer of turning the drum buffer rate methodology, this rapid implementation methodology, and the critical chain one into a software package, which we then implemented at WiseTech to transition into the WiseTech story a wee bit. And what happened there? We sketched it out. We did a rough draft with one of the other guys who'd gone to the hillside with Richard. His name was Zubin. Zubin did a rough draft of buffer control boards using the software that was connected to their existing workflow management system. And talk about like a light switch. The moment we switched it on for a team, that team stopped screaming for resource. So there were, there was whatever, how many teams there were, say 16 teams with upwards of 10 people in each or whatever. And in each team, we switched on the buffer boards, bang, all requests for resource stopped instantly, and they had visible excess capacity. Now, he'd been hiring a developer a week. so suddenly, no hiring for about 18 months. Now, you can multiply out what 18 months worth of weeks times a developer salary is. That's how much money we saved. And Richard, a quote he had at the time was, "This is the first module we've ever built that paid for itself before we finished writing it." And it's used, obviously, right across WiseTech and now in a whole bunch of client sites. And in fact, the ToC portion of the software has been split off into its own product now as well. And some of the people on this call might even be using it. So that was the ToC journey as far as operations is concerned that got me involved in the WiseTech project.
I love the ToC and operations, and of course, you taught me the thinking processes. And I said earlier, I went off and kind of went off into the wilderness and started applying it to the human system. And I literally have had testimonials saying, using that process has literally been like a light bulb being switched on for my brain, which is pretty amazing. So I know from my personal perspective it works, but what about not-for-profit or for-purpose organizations? Can you give us some thoughts or some examples of how it can be applied? Because I know that there's been some conversation here about for organizations that aren't necessarily focused on commercials, but on delivering services.
Yeah, there are plenty of not-for-profit organizations around. I mean, schools is an example of that. And a school produces hopefully educated students, and so in New Zealand particularly, with this much more open measurement of schools system, there's a lot of data available. So analyzing that data as a form of measurement and then delivering improvements on it is an example of how you could use operational performance methodologies in a school. Another one would be charitable work. We did a project with a community of Catholic nuns in which they're looking after an aged care facility. So now the funny thing about, well, it wasn't very funny really, but the awkward thing about that was the number of stakeholders. You've got the person who needs care, they're a stakeholder. You've got the nuns as a religious order with their own objectives. That's a stakeholder. You got the families of the people who are under care, so they're a stakeholder, and you got the staff, the lay staff, the non-religious staff. So, and they're a stakeholder, and then the fifth stakeholder are the donors. You got people who regularly put money into the system, and they want to know their money, their charitable donation is being well deployed. And all of those stakeholders have an opinion about whether or not the organisation is performing. So so doing a project for them was most interesting. The one of the benefactors paid for the project, which was good, and the stories about how all that came to pass. But the interesting problem there is in an aged care facility, where's the constraint, or how do you apply a ToC solution? What are you solving? You've got 26 odd rooms with patients in them, and you've got a bunch of nuns and a bunch of staff, and keep them alive and happy. So what's the goal? What's the prime measure? What's profit
Yeah.
look like when you're not allowed to make it? All of these sorts of things. To me, that's it's dangerous to focus on specific measurements as goal criteria, because measurements drive behavior. In fact, the only reason to have a measure is to alter behavior. If a measure is not altering behavior, it's not really a measure. It should be driving behavior in some way, and you got to be careful what you name as a goal as well. So, how then do I rescue a business like that that's losing money every month when it's charitable? And obviously, if they keep draining money out of the coffers, eventually the site would be closed, and then all the stakeholders would lose. So part of the thinking about ToC and operations is that ToC looks for the singular thing, that the rate limiting resource that is having an effect on throughput or operating expenses in a way that's compromising performance overall. And then we're looking for a source of variation that messes with that flow. Okay, so if we think about the throughput of a business like that's relatively stable because it's charitable donations, and the operating expenses are high. So I took a look at, just do a quick Pareto on the operating expenses and find that labor, of course, is the largest one, and then say, okay, well, where's all the labor going? And there was some significant consumption of labor. So you do a Pareto chart on that, but then I go hunting for where's the variability stuffing with that, because variability in a metric means that if you want a service level, you have to service mean plus some. So if the goal units are delivered only by the area under the curve, the average of the metric, but service levels are have to be 2 standard deviations from there, the bigger the wobble, the greater the more money you have to spend in order to deliver your goal. And I found that one of the high sources of variation was showering and laundry and refreshing rooms after a patient had wet the bed. Now that's pretty odd. You go, okay, I'm going to design a ToC solution around bed wetting. So it's weird where the data takes you, right? So I'm looking at the data and I've got stable T, high variability in the OE, massive variability in the demands placed on the staff and their happiness, and the happiness of the residents, and the happiness of the families, and the happiness of the nuns, all caused by this massive number of hours being shoved into, and a huge laundry cost associated with bedwetting. Simple as that. And I thought, well, how bizarre, because the ToC is all about buffers and about moving load in time. Now, going to the toilet is a buffered system. You have a bladder. And what a surprise, some people's bladders aren't as big as other people's, and it gets worse as they get older. So I thought, I wonder how I could apply buffer management to toileting. So I asked the question, when do you take people to the toilet? And they go, oh, well, at 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and 6 o'clock. Well, I can't even do that. I've been sipping on water. That's ridiculous, So like, well, but it's more efficient, James. I thought, aha. Oh, is it? It's more efficient, is it? Okay, well, I've heard that one before. So we came up with a way of buffer managing it. We created a board in which we had all of the rooms, and then we created a cardboard line segment like that. And then at the end, we marked off the last third of it and chopped that into thirds, 3, 2, 1, 0. And we said, so 3 is you might need to go to the toilet. 2 is you probably want to go to the toilet. 1 is you better go to the toilet imminently. And 0 off the end of the line segment is, well, you've gone to the toilet in the bed.
Hang on, I'll be back in a few minutes because I need to go to the toilet.
Then we put a pin in the other end, and we pinned it to the corkboard that corresponded to the time of day, and the line segment was time. Now it got real simple. If you ate the bed, we just cut like 2 centimeters off the left-hand end of the piece of cardboard. And we moved the buffer shorter, that we reeled in the rope, as it were, for people with a smaller bladder. So eventually the piece of cardboard corresponded to your capacity. And when I say eventually, this happened very, very quickly. It was like a light switch. 2 weeks later, I get a call and I had to go in and face a gaggle of nuns, 20-something nuns, all in a semicircle with me sat in the middle with Mother Superior, while the nun from the laundry ripped into me. Now, I'd never heard a nun swear before. She said, bringing consultants in here to tell us how to run our charitable business is unacceptable. You cannot leave residents lying around in shit and filth and piss. And I'm like, oh, I don't know what sort of a thing you're running here, but this is unacceptable. And Mother Superior I looked at her and she looked at me and she turned and she said, now, sister, that's not what's happening. Thanks to buffer management, no one's wetting the beds anymore. And anyway, how do you know this? And she said, well, the laundry bill. We were spending whatever it was, say $12,000 a week on laundry, and it's gone bang, bang to nothing. And Mother Superior said, well, you'll have to come for a walk with me, sister. Like, because seriously, nobody's wetting the beds anymore. We take everybody to the toilet when they need to go. Well, in fact, before they need to go, that's why they don't wet the beds anymore. She said, I don't believe you. So I had to take her on a tour of her own facility and show the laundry nun that, in fact, buffer management had fixed bedwetting and as a result had dramatically dropped laundry costs, but it also had dropped the cost, because you have to have 2 people to change the beds and take someone to the shower and all of that. And of course, so who's happier? Well, all 5 stakeholders. And they save money. And go back into the...
That's really cool, because there's been a number of examples and a number of questions about what happens when you have multiple stakeholders. And I remember Vicky talking about, I think it was one of her students did one around a council and trying to use different resources and managing different stakeholders. So I mean, that's a really, really good. Well, it's a good example, but the bedwetting, interesting with a bit of humour in it as well. But when you've got not-for-profit, it's amazing. And the other thing that really jumps out for me is people don't believe the results, even though you can see them. People don't believe the results, and that's a problem, right? When it comes to selling ToC.
It's a problem in selling it. It's a problem even after implementation, because not only, like the laundry nun was in complete denial. And of course, I was unfazed because I'd done dozens and dozens of projects where there is an incumbent manager who looks at the graph and says, no way, that's not possible. But you can't do that. Like, it's literally impossible for that to have occurred in only 2 weeks. Like, no, I don't accept. Somebody's lying. Somebody's cooking the books. Can't be done. There was a client in Brisbane whose father, who owned the business, called the auditors in and said he must have been selling drugs or something. Like, how did he get the profit up so high, so fast? Like a light switch. Like, no way. You're up to something. You're selling off the client's stock or something. Like, I don't know what you're doing, but it can't be legal. So his own dad called the auditors in on him, and he exposed everything and said, "This is how I'm doing it." And eventually, of course, the auditors had to go back and said, "No, it all looks perfectly fine. It's just going a lot faster than it was before." Yeah.
That's we talked about Ryan's before, the manufacturing company, and that was exactly the same. Purchased the business within 5 days, boom, just so fast. Yeah. Excellent.
So you mentioned selling ToC.
Yeah.
Well, one of the goal was about manufacturing, and people said, oh, it's just a manufacturing solution. It's been used in hospitals. You've just given us a marvelous example about another not-for-profit organisation. For those of us who are converts, what's constraining? What's the bottleneck of ToC? Why isn't everyone using it?
Oh, I think there's the constraint. That's a tricky one. The capacity constrained resource. It depends on what you think of as the goal. Like if you mean the worldwide adoption of ToC, I think Ali got it right at the beginning when he with that cost accounting, public enemy number one of productivity. The problem is that absorption costing is firstly included in most jurisdictions' tax legislation, that you can add value to inventory. And the problem with that is that you're adding profit. If you add value, you add profit. And that works for the government because you're artificially inflating the tax take. So getting rid of that's probably the worldwide constraint of the adoption of operational ToC. If you could get rid of that, you would change, force everybody back to essentially throughput accounting by law instead of absorption costing or allocated costing by law. And that's
almost
a real
cash
drag.
accounting.
Yeah, well, people don't want to do two sets of books, mostly. Some don't mind, but most don't want to. So if I'm required by law to do the numbers this way, then why would I do them another way as well? And convincing them that the way the government tells you to do it is driving your productivity down is a very difficult, it's a hard ask, you know. And many people are not fluent enough in the mathematics of that to understand it either. So they sort of take the view of, oh, it can't be that bad, can it? You know, until you actually look. So very, very early in most ToC projects, the first thing we're doing is changing the accounting practices to throughput accounting. As soon as we do that, it's really clear very, very quickly when the measurements are driving bad behavior. So that's as far as adoption worldwide is concerned, that's the main thing. As far as the sort of casual dialogue around ToC is concerned, like what's constraining people from talking to each other about ToC as if it's a meaningful thing that they need to know, that's probably a little different. One of the early decisions to name ToC as the theory of constraints was to do with getting acceptance in universities, because you know, the theory of anything always sounds attractive in an academic environment. And if you want professors to teach the stuff, calling it the theory of constraints was a good name. Unfortunately, it's not a very good name when you go into industry, because people don't want the theory of anything. They want the actual, they want the fact of, not the theory of. So that's been a little frustrating for some practitioners. But I don't think even that's it. Imagine, I've sketched this out on a few napkins over the years, and I don't have a napkin and a pen handy, but imagine a scene where, you know, one of those idyllic scenes of a lake with a shore and some mountains in the background, that sort of scene. And imagine there's a path that comes down out of the mountains stage right, and there's a whole lot of people trudging along this path searching for the answer. And they come to a crossroads, and at the crossroads, there's a sign that points down to the lake that says Profit Docks. That's profit with an F, profit, P-R-O-F-I-T. And they look down the road and they see down on the docks in the foreground a whole bunch of fishermen up to their armpits in stinky fish, shoveling fish and banking their profits. But the other sign points up the hill a little way, and it says To Profit Mountain. Now that's the profit with the PH, P-R-O-P-H-E-T. And they look over Profit Mountain and they see marble columns and statues and stages, and they see people standing and orating about this wonderful thing that they've heard of. And so the newcomer looks down at the stinky fish, looks up at the marble columns and goes, yeah, I'll go over there. And they go up to Profit Mountain and they listen to the prophet. And then up there on Profit Mountain, the prophets are saying, you know, the biggest problem with all of this is trying to figure out how to sell it. And you know, we haven't really got that sorted yet. And one of the fishermen down on the dock says, come down here and get your hands dirty. I'll show you how to do it. We're backing up the money trucks down here. Now, I've been to conferences where in the room, you've got Justin Rothmarsh, who's been part of this conference. You've got myself, you've got Dee, there's maybe 10 people in the room who have no problem selling theory of constraints concepts to customers and getting them to implement. No problem at all. And yet you've got speaker after speaker after speaker on stage saying that the big problem with the stuff is it's hard to explain, it's hard to teach, and it's hard to sell. And I think you've got 10 fishermen in the room who've been up to their armpits and stinky fish backing up the money trucks for 25 years. Why did you ask them how to do it?
I just think that's awesome, because actually there's a comment in the chat right at the beginning. I asked everybody what was the highlight for this conference, and I literally am going to read this out verbatim. Everyday people using ToC tools to get big wins.
Oh yeah.
Very pragmatic advice given throughout the conference as opposed to academic blah blah.
Yeah, I think Clark's chosen the speakers quite well.
so that is incredibly high praise, Clark, and I think high five, because absolutely
that's well done.
That is fantastic feedback, and it just what a great way to kind of capture that, James, by saying do the work. Let's go and do the work.
I want to emphasize that there is a need for Profit Mountain as well, because structured and considered debate and discussing the fundamentals and having reasoned argument about the theory is valuable, right? So the fisherman goes up the mountain now and again and sits and listens and goes, wow, that's really cool, I never thought of that, and then goes down to the dock and applies it. What's rarer is for the prophet on the mountain to go down to the docks and get dirty, and that kind of grates for me, like more of the prophets need to go make a profit, because the profiteers certainly go to the prophets for advice. I'll go to the conferences, Justin goes to conferences. I mean, I tend to put the cat amongst the pigeons when we do, but we're happy to go. But it would be nice to have the reverse occur and have some of the theorists debate profiting from ToC as opposed to the theory and the concepts and the talking about it. I put great value on understanding the fundamentals, like understanding at a very clear level how the stuff works, a very basic level, all the points of clarity of it, not just I heard a thing or I read a book and I'm just copying that. Like actually get under it and understand why it works the way that it does, so that you can evolve it and invent your own solutions and have deeper conversations about it. For example, we've merged the critical chain methodology and the drum buffer rope methodology into the PAVE software in one go. Like, as far as our users are concerned, there's no difference. They just see it as a seamless system. Now, that came about because way back at the start, when I very first learned it, of course, Dee Jacob was explaining how she and Ellie had been translating from all the concepts of drum buffer rope across into the project management world. And she gave me the parallels right then in the classroom that day. She said, this buffer is in operations is the same as this buffer in projects, but it has a different name because these people use a different nomenclature. And this buffer is the same as that buffer. And the logic and all the underlying whys and wherefores of it, you see. So when we wrote the software, I'd been thinking about it that way from the get-go, not because of my own insight, but because that was the way it was taught to me. So I never saw it as two solutions. It was always one. Right? One was simply a derivative of the other, that sort of thing. Now, the other thing that comes about in the ToC community when it comes to figuring out how to sell the stuff is stop selling the stuff. Like, you don't need to sell a theory. Like, if you use mathematics to design a bridge, you don't sell calculus to the customer, do you? When do you do that? I don't know any engineer. I mean, if an engineer was in a sales meeting and started lecturing the customer on calculus and the formulas underlying the way the bridge was, you'd escort him out and go, no, it'll take this vehicles a day, right? It'll last this many decades, right? And it'll require this much material to build. get rid of the engineer talking about formulas and maths. And then if the customer says, no, I want to hear all that, and starts arguing with the engineer starts going back to first principles and explaining how the formulas were derived in the first place. No, like, no. ToC should go in by stealth. It's like, surprise, you've been ToC'd. You know, you should find out after the fact that you've already done it. People should get to the classroom, do the course, and go, oh, is that why we did that? Oh, yeah, right. So you know, do you teach and do, or do you do and then teach?
Oh, are you putting a conflict cloud out there?
We figured out very early on, do it, and then some of the customer people want to know why it worked. Okay, they can do the course and explain it to anyone else who cares. Most people just want to get on with it. Just tell them what to do and they do it.
So perhaps over-explaining is your enemy. Trying to explain this whole thing is being like the engineer in the calculus.
Absolutely. You used to say that, you know, the more ToC you explain, the less likely you are to get the order. Right? I mean, you think about, you would have had some conversation in the last 2 days about undesirable effects and about, I think there might have been some talk about conflicts. And did Ian end up showing a figure 8 loop? Did he have one?
We had some druids.
A couple of druids. Okay,
yeah.
If I spend an hour with a customer and all I do is hear their druids, in fact, this happened yesterday. A guy came to our office near where I live and told me his story for 20 odd minutes. And I said very little, I just took notes. And of course, I'm looking for the druids in his story. Like when he says, well, on the one hand, I need to this, but on the other hand, that. So he's giving me that. And he's given me all the negative effects of cash flow and stuff. And then he sort of ran out of gas. And I said, is there anything else? No. I said, let me read it back to you. So, and I just replayed his story where there was a set of 5 or 6 of these loops driving a bunch of operational negative effects, which drove the commercial negative effects. And I retold his story. And he went, wow, yeah, that's exactly it. I said, okay. So can I show you exactly where variability is completely messing up your business? Yeah, I said, right here, and stick my finger on it. Your profit and your performance go up and down in proportion to that element right there. And he stared at it and he's like, interesting. Now,
no, that's not the reaction. There's a bigger reaction than that. Come on.
yeah. So the point, I don't have to teach him current reality trees. I don't have to teach him druids. I don't have to teach him any theory. He already knows the story. He's already an expert in his own business. It just hadn't occurred to him, perhaps, that one variable, more than any other, is the one that he needs to look at. And I said, well, you go and do an experiment. Just try and alter that. Just alter that for 2 weeks and come back to me. Now, if he does that and he comes back and says, wow, that was disturbing. It doesn't work every single time, though. There are some confounding factors or there are environmental. At that point, I can say, well, you know, it's all obvious. I'll take it from here. Or there's, my business is a little more complicated than that. Can you help me? Well, I don't need to sell ToC. Because if he says, look, can you help us with this? Yes. What will you do? Well, stuff. You know.
So I've just realized something, and it's just become glaringly obvious to me. So you taught me the thinking process, and I went off and started applying it to human beings. But I didn't go out and teach people the thinking process. I just simply did it. I just said,
just do it.
Oh, yeah, and then what happens is that they start finding their own assumptions and their own beliefs that are getting in the way. And I literally point and say, is that your hidden commitment? Is that the thing that's in your way? And they look at me and they go, yeah. And then you go, so what if you change that? My whole life would change. It's like a light bulb being switched on. So I hadn't actually connected, but you taught me well.
Oh, good.
And presumably, Carl, some of those people at the end of it say, "Oh, can you teach me how to do those cloud things?"
That's exactly what happens. That's exactly what happens. And yeah, because they go, wow, that works. And that's really powerful. Yeah. Show me how to do it. And what's even better is that when they learn how to do it, they can do it on themselves.
Yeah.
They can literally resolve their own conflicts. But you know that, Graham, because you've taught this stuff for a long time as well.
Yeah. I see Peter Thorby has made a comment in the chat that he's using this stuff on his farmers and they haven't got a clue. They probably can't even spell ToC. We're starting to run out of time. We did have a question earlier from Seraphim. I'm just wondering whether it might be easier to for you to ask this directly rather than me.
Is this about the supply chain one?
Yes, it was. Did you see it? Oh no, he's gone.
Yes.
Oh, here he is. Yes,
yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah, I could ask the question. That would be great. I guess it seems like the operations, projects, IT. I've seen a lot of those implementations work very well myself, but right now the ones I'm personally seeing a lot of difficulty with are supply chain, because lead times worldwide have just dramatically increased. Sometimes, like, we have a typical 3-week lead time for some component, and now it's gone to 60 weeks. And at first it was with a few components. Now it's with a majority of components, or even sometimes 80% or more. And the standard replenishment solutions, DDMRP solutions, things like that, are just not able to keep up with that kind of variability. I'm wondering if anyone is seeing these dramatic results that we all know that ToC can help achieve. Are you still seeing that in these sort of supply chain situations? How do you deal with this kind of reality that so many companies are dealing with right now?
Well, this is an extreme case, but we live on an island in New Zealand, of course, and Australia is an island, but a much bigger one, with more connectedness than we have here. So we're quite used to transport variables completely messing with our economic situation, both inbound and outbound. The thing to remember with being in a competitive landscape in business is you don't need perfection. You just need to be better than a bit above average to have quite a substantial competitive advantage. And I think there was the old joke from the TQM days about the two guys in the not the jungle, but on the plains of Africa or something, and a lion appears, and one fella immediately rips off his rucksack, pulls off his walking shoes, and starts putting on his Nike runners. And the other joke is watching this, going, "What are you doing? You can't outrun the lion." He said, "I don't need to outrun the lion. Just need to outrun you." So the game with the ToC solution is not, you don't need to outrun the lion. You just need to outrun the other guy. So we're in that environment. Like, take that as your environment. We're in that environment. Everyone is suffering equally. How do you not suffer equally? Okay, so where is the damage being done? Consider that environmental, and then you've got to buffer out enough of the environment. So you don't need, this is a problem. You can't solve this or that or the other. I don't need to solve it. I always remember that I don't need to outrun the lion. I just need to outrun you. I don't need to solve it. I just need to be less affected by it than the other guy, and not by much. Like, I don't need to outrun you by a long way. Just a little will do. It's the same logic here. So when I look at systems like that, where there's chaos and there's outside confusion, I say, how do I buffer out some of the outside confusion and just gain a small advantage? And advantages are gained on the turn. When things are when things are getting worse and then they reverse direction, or they're getting better and they reverse direction, and everybody's intuition is still going in the wrong direction and they're still chasing goals, that spotting the turn in the environment is critical. So I think in that environment, how do you run perfect replenishment? Well, you don't, but then neither does your competitor or the next one or the next one. What you need to do is be slightly quicker. So how do you buffer that out? Now you can use variability, and you're trying to move load in time. You're trying to use buffer management to shift load in time so that you're less messed up. It's no different to, like with interest rates. People are trying to figure out how to choose the best interest rate for their house loan or something. And I'm an executive, just bought a house, and I said straight away to the bank, I'll need 3 different interest rates. Thanks. I'll take, I'll put a third on floating, a third on 2 years, and a third on 4 years to get the rate. And the lady straight away, she said to me, buffering a risk. So she instantly understood the financial implications behind what I'd done, because that way my interest rate rises, but slower, right, and falls, but slower. So the interest rate's doing this, and mine is lagging that, because I've got a mixture of rates, and that buffering enables me to make safer decisions. So it's the same sort of logic. Is like, don't have to fix everything that's trying to outrun the lion. Just try to buffer out some of the noise and have a smoother life than your competitor, and just be a little earlier than your competitor, or a little cheaper, or whatever the variables are that you're pursuing. I hope that's slightly helpful. We get more into it later another time if you want to go into more detail. Another question in there that looks good to answer.
Thank you for that answer.
You're welcome.
I suppose ideally you'd see the turn coming and perhaps stockpile more raw materials, or get more orders in, or be the guy that paid the supplier on the day rather than 60 days later, or just try and give yourself some sort of competitive advantage.
Owen asked a question about new businesses where you're trying to grow and the workflow and revenue are highly variable. I would apply ToC specifically to new business acquisition, and the constraint is proposed close. The proposed close capability is the constraint. You can only make sales if you're in conversations with people. Then you need to increase the number of conversations. So you got to figure out how to do that. Now, does that work? Absolutely. I got the ToC consulting business off the ground in 90 days. I got T above OE in 90 days. I've always only said, I don't care how much strife my team gets into, I'm only 90 days from a profit. You come in and you focus on proposed close as the constraint, because that is always the rate limiting skill, is proposed close. Words coming out of your mouth, customer says, yes, I'll have it, I'll buy that. There are some other things in there, Owen, if you want to talk to the Viago guys, there's a thing they call the sales craft workshop. That's some content you could request. I saw Graham, or one of the guys from Viago, could track that down for you. That's got a whole bunch of stuff in it about how to quickly build services or consulting based businesses. What else we got in here? Was there any other questions you guys noticed as the scroll was going up?
No questions particularly, but yeah, certainly lots of obviously what you're saying is resonating with people, and there's some of their own examples. There's a reference to Philip Maris, who implements without them even knowing, and when they've made a few $1 million, he tells them how it works.
Bruno, tell me what that was about. DC is full of negative cultural assumptions in your example.
I think Bruno was talking about Seraphim's.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. I was referring to Seraphim's comment above. Let me just get back to the chat to remember the context, but it was precisely the discussion that we had about is the need for buy-in from management and the conflict that he was explaining between addressing the real problem versus performing the success theater. And while I have observed that, I agree the conflict is real.
Hearing successful. Yeah, I talked about the wow measures, you know, and how I don't really like to have drawn out discussions about whether or not a customer's going to continue to do an injection that's making them 30% more GP per day. Like I just don't want to have that. I don't even entertain the possibility of somebody turning off that injection and having the performance drop, because if it drops and stays down, it will only be a matter of weeks before, as a consultant, you're considered to have given faulty advice and you're fired, even though they uninstalled the injection, not you. So I don't, you know, I want to have a lot of power in the way the dialogue is managed around whether or not this or that worked. So this is why I like a connection. And did anybody show up the performance quadrant in the last 2 days? Is that on video already? I'll just describe it very quickly. If you imagine if you imagine a quadrant, and in the top left you've got a specific countable action, and then adjacent to that you've got the direct effect of that action. So the action could be double click an application, and the effect of it is the application opens, just to be overly simplistic. So an action is something a person does, and the effect is the thing that what they're doing was supposed to directly cause. The direct effect should drive a lead measure, which drives a lag measure. So that's your 4 corners. When we go into projects, I love to have quadrants set up for 2 or 3 key metrics. And I want to very quickly draw the relationship that says, if we do more of this behavior, we will immediately get this effect. And if we get this effect quickly, like within a countable number of days, a short number of days, you know, like 7 or 10 or 3, you will see this lead measure move. And then you know as a business manager or as an owner that the lag measure must follow. Not only that, let's stop doing the behavior. And the direct effect stops immediately, and the lead measure tanks quickly within days. Now turn it back on. Oh, look, it went back up again. Okay, so can we not turn that off ever again? Right? I like that. Causality needs to be super clear for people. Now, finding out what behavior to measure, yeah, that's some of the art of ToC. You know, of course, that's one of the things that people often say, you know, a lot in project is, how do you come up with those so fast? You know, well, practice, but also understanding 2 things: the causality and the cause and effect in the ToC systems and the way the maths all works, and then secondly, the cause and effect in the client system and how one maps to the other.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome. Hey, I'm thinking maybe
Clark,
what we could do is ask, what are some of the highlights out of the last hour from James's conversation? And is there anything else that people want to pick up? But because, James, I think you've done an exceptional job of actually kind of touching on just about every single presentation that we've had over the last 2 days. And I'm actually kind of going, I'm wondering, was that good management or good luck? But we know it's not luck.
Yes, it was.
So we know it's not luck.
But that was fantastic facilitated by you guys. That's what
Trevor's just saying one of the highlights for him was the bladder buffering. So
bladder buffering, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really nice way to just kind of to wrap up, and as an end note, because you have touched
a one-liner on that one.
Oh yeah, go.
You know how the thing you hate to hear when you're selling ToC is somebody looks at you after demanding the detail, and you are sucked in by the demand, and you give them some, and they go, "Oh, that wouldn't work here." I had the same thing happen with the bladder buffering. I had somebody in another aged care facility ask me, "What the heck did you do for the nuns?" And I told them, "Oh, that wouldn't work here."
Yeah. Awesome.
What, taking people to the toilet on time wouldn't work, really? Okay.
Nothing like ending the day with a bit of toilet humour. Thank you very much for your time, James. Thank you very much, Clark, for organising all this.
Absolutely.
I don't know about anyone else, but I've been here almost all the time and I'm absolutely knackered. So, Clark, do you want to close things down?
Well, I'm not sure if I should have called this the Flow Conference now, considering where we've just gone. Although I suppose ToC Down-Under. Anyway, enough of that. Thank you, James. Thank you, James. Thank you to the beautiful assistants here, Graham and Carl. Well, I use the word generously. Thank you very much for picking up and doing the facilitation in some of these sessions. It just made it so much easier. Thank you, everyone who's turned up and who's been busy with your fingertips. Your fingertips mean so much more when we're doing this than you might even realize. So thank you. And we'll probably see you next year, although we may do some more of these over the next, but I think we may take on a different region in between. I think we may try and conquer Europe at some stage, because there's a lot of really good stuff out there that you know is the profit makers who are busy out making the profits, as opposed to the I don't know what the word is that the other prophets do, but there's probably an expression which is too impolite to mention right at the end of it. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Yeah, cool.
And I'd just like to finish off by saying there's already people doing it in the chat. So in the chat, there are people just saying a great big thanks to Clark. So if you've got a message you want to drop to Clark while we wrap up and finish off, now's the chance to do it. Don't forget that the videos will be available to you, so you'll be able to check them out. I don't think it'll be the last that you hear from the ToC show. In fact, I know that won't be the case, because this content will be dripped out over a long period of time, and no doubt we'll get to have more discussions with you. So please just drop your comments into the chat, just by way of saying, hey, thanks, Clark. Really appreciate your efforts. What an absolute legend, and really appreciate what you've done in bringing this all together. So cheers, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day or evening or morning, wherever you happen to be.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
We'll have a big wave. We'll have a big wave and slowly drop off, and we'll close in about 10-15 seconds. See you guys.
Go and get your dinners. We'll go to bed, some of you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye, Mariana.
There are some great comments coming through. Great comments, Clark. Awesome. Well done.
Lovely. There we go.
Yeah.
Thanks, Vicky.
And thanks, James. That was a
Vicky
great
and
way to
James.
end.
It was a fantastic way to finish up.
Yeah. Right. Who wants to have the privilege? Shall I have the privilege of clicking the...
Absolutely. It's your button.
Right. There you go. We'll see you later. Thank you. Especially James. Thanks.
Bye.
That was kind of like when you go out for dinner and you eat too much, and then they come out with a dessert and you go, oh, I could feel a little bit more. and it's a really lovely way to end. So thank you. Cheers, bud. That's really good of you.
Awesome.
Right. Goodbye.